Iran never needed to close the strait militarily. It needed to close it commercially. And those are two completely different problems. By 2010, Iran had deployed the Noor anti-ship missile, a domestically produced system with a 200-kilometer range, capable of striking any vessel in the strait from hardened coastal positions. By 2020, it had added drone swarms capable of saturating naval defenses. By 2025, it had laid the groundwork for a minefield that U.S. Navy minesweepers would need weeks, not days, to clear. The last time a U.S. adversary built this kind of layered sea denial infrastructure, it took 20 years and 58,000 American lives to acknowledge it couldn't be dismantled from the air. That was Vietnam. This is different because Vietnam didn't control 20% of the world's oil supply. Iran's military planners understood one more thing. The Strait of Hormuz is not just an oil route. It is the only export route for Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE. Qatar alone supplies 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas through it. When Iran closes the strait, it doesn't just hurt the United States. It holds Europe's heating, Asia's manufacturing, and the Gulf's food supply. 80% of GCC food imports transit through Hormuz, simultaneously hostage. This is not just about military infrastructure. This is about whether the global economy can function without a 33-mile strip of water that one country has spent 4 decades learning to control. That's the history. Now here's the mechanics. And this is where the strategy becomes genuinely difficult to counter. It issued a single statement to the global shipping industry. Any vessel transiting the strait without Iranian authorization would be considered a legitimate military target. Within 48 hours, Lloyd's of London suspended war risk coverage for Hormuz transits. Without insurance, no commercial operator will move a tanker. Without tankers, the oil doesn't move. The strait was closed not by Iranian guns, but by a single insurance decision in London. Tanker transits collapsed by 94% in the first 72 hours. Carrier strike group deployments increased to 3 simultaneous groups in the region: the USS Gerald R. Ford, USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, and USS Harry S. Truman. Naval escorts were offered to commercial vessels. Strikes on Iranian coastal missile batteries began within 96 hours of the closure. But here's what changes everything. The oil market operates on a principle that most people never think about: just-in-time delivery. Refineries don't store months of crude, they store days. The average U.S. refinery holds between 15 and 25 days of crude inventory. The average European refinery holds less. Asian refineries, which depend most heavily on Gulf oil, hold between 10 and 20 days. The IEA's emergency release of 412 million barrels sounds enormous. It is, in absolute terms, the largest coordinated reserve release in history, larger than the 2011 Libya response, larger than the 2022 Ukraine response. But 412 million barrels, divided by the 10 to 12 million barrel per day shortage created by the Hormuz closure, yields approximately 34 to 41 days of coverage. 34 days. That is the world's countdown clock. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve released 172 million barrels over 120 days, approximately 1 million barrels per day. Infrastructure constraints mean the maximum practical release rate is 4.4 million barrels per day, but sustained releases at that rate have never been achieved. In 2022, during the Ukraine crisis, the actual release rate averaged 1 million barrels per day. The gap between what the SPR can theoretically provide and what it can actually deliver is the gap between a managed crisis and an unmanaged one. Two countries are not watching the clock with fear. They are watching it with patience. Russia and China. Russia's position is almost surgically precise. Every dollar that Brent crude rises above $82 fills a budget gap that Western sanctions created. Before the Hormuz closure, Russia was selling oil to India and China at discounts of up to $25 per barrel to circumvent sanctions. After the closure, with Brent at $120, those discounts evaporated. Russia is now earning more per barrel than it did before the Ukraine war, not because it changed its strategy, but because Iran changed the market. The power of Siberia. 2 pipeline, Russia's proposed overland gas route to China, bypassing every maritime choke point on Earth, suddenly looks not like an infrastructure project, but like the most strategically valuable energy asset in the world. Every day the Hormuz closure continues. The argument for overland energy architecture between Russia and China becomes more compelling. Iran didn't just close a strait, it made the case for a Eurasian energy system that doesn't need the US Navy to function. China's position is more complex but equally calculated. Beijing negotiated exceptions, allowing Chinese-flagged vessels to continue transiting the strait, a detail that received almost no coverage in Western media, but represents a fundamental shift in the geopolitical architecture of the crisis. China is not neutral, it is selectively insulated, and selective insulation in a global crisis is a form of power. Meanwhile, the countries that built their energy security around the assumption of a US-guaranteed open Strait of Hormuz are now reassessing everything. Japan is in emergency talks with Australia about accelerating LNG supply agreements. South Korea is reopening conversations about nuclear energy expansion that had been politically dormant for a decade. India is deepening its Russian oil dependency in direct defiance of US pressure, not because it wants to, but because the alternative is rationing. The bypass routes exist, but they are insufficient. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline can move 5 to 7 million barrels per day to the Red Sea, but the global shortage is 10 to 12 million barrels per day. The UAE's Habshan Fujairah pipeline adds another 1.8 million barrels per day. Combined, the bypasses cover roughly 60% of the gap. The remaining 40%, 4 to 5 million barrels per day, has no alternative route. It simply does not move. And here is the strategic reality that no Western government has stated publicly. The Strait of Hormuz cannot be replaced. It was not designed to be replaced. The entire architecture of the global energy system, built over 70 years of US naval dominance, assumed the strait would always be open. That assumption is now gone. Iran didn't build a bomb. It built a clock. And while the world watches the missiles, Russia and China are already building the world that comes after the countdown ends. The question is not whether the world can survive this crisis. It can. The question is what the world looks like on day 35 and who designed it. We started with missiles. Everyone always starts with missiles. They're visible, countable, and satisfying to destroy on satellite imagery. But the weapon that is actually determining the outcome of this conflict has no warhead. It has no launch code. It cannot be intercepted. It is a 33-mile strip of water, a Lloyd's of London insurance decision, and a countdown clock measured in days of crude inventory. Iran didn't need to build a nuclear weapon to hold the world hostage. It needed to build a choke point strategy, and it spent 40 years doing exactly that, while the world watched the missiles. There is a particular irony in what's happening. The United States built the most powerful navy in human history. It can project force to any ocean on Earth within days. And yet it finds itself in a conflict where the decisive battlefield is an actuarial table in London and a 34-day reserve buffer that gets shorter every morning. The missiles are real. The countdown is real. Russia and China's patience is real, but only one of them was always going to determine how this ends, and it was never the one with the warhead. If this analysis gave you something you didn't have before, hit like, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the bell. Now check the next video.